I'm Rachel Morgan. I served 2 tours overseas, pulled soldiers out of burning wreckage, and built a 7-figure investment portfolio by 34. But at my brother's wedding, my father stood before 200 guests and said, I was nothing. What he didn't know was that the CEO he'd invited was about to thank me publicly for a $1 million investment that saved his company and 200 jobs. I didn't raise my voice, I just let the truth speak louder. Still I came, not out of obligation but out of some lingering need to see for myself that I had in fact moved on. The Oak Haven resort just outside Austin was sprawling and ostentatious, all manicured hedges and fountains that served no real purpose other than to impress. I arrived early, not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to avoid the attention that came with arriving late. My dress was a simple navy wrap, practical heels, no makeup, but a touch of tinted balm. If anyone noticed me, they didn't show it. I checked in at the front, gave my name to a perky young coordinator who looked like she had never seen a woman in her 30s traveling alone. She handed me a name tag, which I didn't wear, and pointed me toward the garden where the ceremony would be held. The place was already buzzing. Waitstaff moved quickly with trays of champagne. Laughter rang out in little clusters under the big oaks. The kind of laughter I used to think meant joy, but now I knew better. It was the sound of people trying not to say the wrong thing too loudly. I found a seat in the back row of white folding chairs arranged in a semicircle. No one noticed me sit. No one turned to say hello. Daniel was up front in a tailored gray suit, laughing with his best man. His fiancée, Sabrina, had always struck me as sweet and far too patient for our family, but maybe that was what Daniel needed. I didn't resent her. I barely knew her. Then I saw him. My father, Robert Morgan, was standing near the makeshift stage. Same stiff stance, same blazer he probably had tailored back in 2002. He looked proud. Of course he did. His golden boy was getting married and the world was exactly as he wanted. When the music changed and the crowd hushed, he stepped up to the microphone. I knew that stance too. Shoulders squared, eyes forward, voice just loud enough to command attention. He'd given the same kind of speech at every family function since I was a teenager. Daniel's graduation, Daniel's promotion, Daniel's birthday, Rachel's accomplishments. Not in the script. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here to celebrate Daniel and Sabrina. I looked around. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. I couldn't help but notice the pride in his voice. He paused dramatically and smiled toward Daniel. My son, my pride. Always focused, always driven. I could hear people nodding, the kind of agreement that didn't need to be said aloud, and I see many familiar faces here today. Friends, family, those who've been with us through every step. He scanned the crowd. His eyes brushed past me like I was a chair. Someone forgot to fold. I was used to that. It didn't sting anymore, not really. Daniel is everything I could have asked for in a son. He has vision, ambition, and the heart to build something meaningful. He took a risk and he's earned every bit of this moment. A pause. I thought maybe he was done. And as for my daughter Rachel, he let the sentence hang just long enough for a few heads to turn. Well, she's here. That's what matters. Another smile, but this one was sharper. The crowd laughed politely as if they understood the joke. I felt a tightness in my jaw. My hands stayed folded in my lap. I didn't blink. The sun felt hotter all of a sudden, even under the canopy. I remembered sitting at our kitchen table when I was 16, showing him my acceptance letter to West Point. He had barely glanced at it. That's good, Rachel. Just remember, this family needs more than soldiers. We need builders, leaders. He never meant me. The speech went on. Toasts were raised. The music picked up again, people clapped and hugged and moved toward the reception tent. I stayed in my seat for a while. My eyes were dry. I hadn't come here to be acknowledged. I had come to remember that I no longer needed to be. Eventually I stood, adjusted the strap of my bag, and walked slowly toward the back patio where the cocktails were being served. My heels clicked softly against the stone. The noise of the crowd grew louder again, but it all passed over me like wind through trees. I was there, but not really. A shadow with a name no one spoke. Until I heard a voice behind me, low and surprised. "Wait, is that Rachel?" I turned, but the voice had already disappeared into the crowd. I moved toward the far end of the patio, away from the voices and the clicking of champagne flutes. There was a stone bench near the hedges that no one had claimed. I sat down, letting my shoulders relax for the first time since I stepped into the resort. I could still hear my father's words echoing in my mind. The casual cruelty wrapped in charm, dressed like Pre. It was always like that with him. Words that felt harmless to everyone else but scraped my skin raw. I picked at the edge of my sleeve, staring at the grass, and found myself slipping backward into memory. I was 8 again, sitting at the kitchen table in our old house in Round Rock, flipping through a science textbook that was 2 grade levels ahead. My mother had bought it from a thrift store, proud of how fast I learned. She used to smile at me like I was magic, but not him. Robert Morgan didn't believe in magic, only results. He'd walk in after work, drop his keys on the counter, ask Daniel how his soccer game went, then glance at me and ask if I'd done the dishes. It wasn't neglect, it was intentional, like he had decided early on who his legacy would be and who would be left to make sure the lights stayed on. In high school, I pushed harder. Straight A's, AP classes, top of my class in physics and calculus. I joined track not because I liked running, but because it gave me a place to put the anger. I won districts twice. My coach called me a machine. My father asked if Daniel had come to watch. At 17, I told him I planned to enlist. I'd done the research. I wanted structure, purpose, and a way out. He looked at me from across the dinner table and said I'd grow out of it. When I told him it wasn't a phase, he leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and said, "If you walk that path, you walk it alone." And I did. At 18, I shipped out to basic, spent 2 winters in Alaska where the cold burned your eyelashes and your boots froze stiff before sunrise. I learned discipline, command, resilience. I learned to take orders from men who had never seen a woman carry a 60-pound pack without complaint. I outran most of them, outshot a few too. I saw things in those years that no one back home would ever understand. I lost friends. I gained scars. I carried stories I couldn't tell anyone. But through it all, I built something my father never could see. I built myself. By 2015, I had served 6 years and walked away with 2 commendations, a shattered wrist, and a discharge that came with honor but no fanfare. No homecoming, no parade, just a cheap duffel bag and a ride back to Austin where no one waited. I stayed with a friend from my unit for a month, then moved into a tiny 1-bedroom near downtown. I took a job at a logistics company managing warehouse inventories. It was dull work, but it paid the bills. At night, I read books on investing, finance, the stock market. I watched lectures, took free online courses. I studied until my eyes blurred because I knew I couldn't go back to being just another name on a resume. I needed something I could own. By 2018, I started with a few $1,000s. Safe bets at first. Then I learned to spot patterns read between the earnings reports. I didn't get lucky. I got meticulous. When the pandemic hit, I stayed in, studied harder. The markets crashed, then surged. I rode the waves, made my first 100,000, then more. All the while, I never asked for anything. Not a loan, not a favor, not even a phone call. Robert knew nothing about it. That's how I liked it. Daniel, on the other hand, had his startup dreams financed fresh out of college. $150,000, just like that. Dad called it seed money. Told everyone Daniel had vision. When MindMap AI launched in 2020, there were press releases, photos, a feature in the local tech journal. They had a launch party at a rooftop bar. I wasn't invited. The app flopped by late 2022. Poor user retention, buggy backend. No monetization strategy. Investors pulled out. The team dissolved. Dad blamed the economy. I never said I told you so. I didn't need to. I had been invisible long enough to know how to vanish without a sound. A breeze stirred the leaves beside me, and I blinked back into the present. The noise of the wedding reception was still in the air like a pressure I couldn't escape. I looked down at my phone. No new messages, no missed calls, no one asking where I was. That was the thing about being forgotten. Eventually, people stopped pretending you mattered at all. I stood up and walked back toward the edge of the crowd, keeping to the shadows the way I had learned during nighttime drills. Unnoticed, unremarkable, but always observing. I didn't need to be seen, not yet. I eased back toward the edge of the reception tent where the crowd had thickened. Servers passed by with trays of shrimp cocktail and mini sliders. Guests mingled under fairy lights strung between the oaks, and a live band played soft jazz that no one was really listening to. The sun had just started to dip, casting a warm gold over everything. The kind of light that made people nostalgic for things that never really happened. Jessica found me before I found her. She had a sixth sense for these things. She came up behind me and looped an arm through mine without a word. Her phone was in her other hand. Screen dark, but I could tell she had been recording something. "He's winding up," she whispered, tilting her head toward the front. "Big moment coming. Want to stand closer?" I shook my head. "Not tonight." She gave my arm a gentle squeeze and moved a few steps forward while I stayed near a column wrapped in ivy. I had a perfect view of the small platform where the mic was set up, just under the glowing monogram of Daniel and Sabrina's initials. The chatter faded as Robert stepped forward again. Microphone in hand, face beaming. He looked like he was exactly where he belonged, commanding a room full of people who thought he had done something worth admiring. His blazer was crisp, pocket square, folded just so, every detail a performance. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice calm and practiced. "I know weddings are about the couple, but tonight I'd like to take a moment to talk about something else. About legacy. About family." He paused for effect. A few polite chuckles rippled through the crowd. I watched Daniel shift his weight shoulders. Squared eyes flicking nervously between his fiancée and his father. Robert continued. "When Daniel was 5, he used to take apart his toys just to see how they worked, not to break them, but to understand. That's the kind of mind he has, always building, always searching for better ways to do things." He turned slightly, gesturing toward Daniel. "My son is the future of this family, a builder, a visionary. He took a risk in a time when most people played it safe, and he's built something we can all be proud of." Applause swelled. Sabrina beamed beside Daniel. Guests lifted their glasses. Jessica turned toward me for half a second, lips pursed, then back to her phone. Then it came. Robert cleared his throat and smiled wider. "And as for my daughter Rachel, well..." He let the silence stretch like a rubber band, pulled just far enough to sting. "She's here tonight, which is nice. That's what matters, right?" There it was. Laughter, soft and scattered, awkward enough to be honest. I didn't move. My face stayed still, trained in the kind of composure you learn when a superior officer dresses you down in front of your unit. I counted my breaths. In, out, don't flinch. Jessica turned toward me again. Her smile had vanished. She hit a button on her phone and slid it back into her bag. I caught the slight shake of her head. I watched Daniel. He was trying not to look at me, but he couldn't quite manage it. His eyes darted in my direction and then away like a kid caught sneaking a glance at a test answer. He adjusted his tie, shifted his stance, clapped a beat too late. He knew. He always knew, even if he never said it. Robert wrapped up the toast with something about new beginnings and family values. More clapping. Music swelled again. People returned to their drinks and conversations like nothing had happened. I stepped back away from the tent and the lights and the people who laughed politely because they didn't know what else to do. Behind me, the lawn sloped down toward a quiet stretch of tree. I walked until the sound of the party dulled into a background hum. The air was cooler there, the grass soft under my shoe. I let my hands fall to my sides, fingers unclenching for the first time in minutes. A part of me had hoped foolishly that he wouldn't say anything at all, that his silence would be his mercy. But he had found a way to twist the knife anyway, dressed it up like a joke. Made me the punchline of a story I never agreed to be part of. I sat on a low stone wall and looked up at the sky. No stars yet, just fading light and the first hint of dusk. I wasn't angry. Not the kind of anger that needed shouting or breaking things. It was deeper than that, older, the kind that turns sharp and quiet like ice on glass. Footsteps approached. I didn't turn around, I already knew who it was. Jessica sat down beside me without a word, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The music from the tent still drifted over the trees, a low hum of saxophone and laughter too distant now to sting. She didn't say anything right away, and I was grateful for that. Silence, when shared, could sometimes say more than anything else. After a while, she nudged my arm lightly with her elbow. "He's a piece of work," she muttered, voice low. I didn't answer. We both knew that already. She turned toward me, searching my face for something I wasn't ready to give. But then she reached into her purse and handed me her phone. The screen showed a paused video, the frame frozen on my father's smug smile, his hand raised in mid-toast. Her thumb hovered over the play button. "I recorded it," she said. "Just in case." "Just in case what?" "Just in case you forget how strong you are." I didn't press play. I just held the phone for a moment, then locked the screen and handed it back. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "You know I wasn't always like this." She looked at me, puzzled. "This version of me," I said. "The quiet one, the one who doesn't fight back." Her gaze softened. "Tell me." I stared out at the trees again, and I did. Back in 2021, I was working with a small investment group out of Denver. Nothing big, just three of us pooling our capital, trying to find companies that hadn't made the news yet. One of our analysts flagged a tech startup called TechLight Innovations. They had patented energy-efficient sensor systems for smart homes, but their funding had dried up mid-pandemic. Their CFO quit and they were 30 days from collapse. I flew out to Seattle to meet the founder. Lucas Grant. Young, maybe 33, sharp, honest in a way that was rare in his position. We talked for 4 hours, not just about the company, but about his people. He had engineers working unpaid for 2 months because they believed in the product. I liked that. I respected it. I saw potential. Real potential. The market was shifting. Smart infrastructure was about to explode and no one was ready for it yet. No one except him. But no bank would touch them. No VC firm wanted to back a company that close to dying. They needed a miracle, or at least someone reckless enough to take a chance. I wired $1 million into their account the next morning. Jessica's eyes widened. Wait, what? Every cent I had saved over 5 years. Gone in 60 seconds. You never told me. I never told anyone. I made Lucas sign an agreement that my name wouldn't appear on any paperwork, not yet. He didn't ask why. He just nodded. I think he understood more than he let on. That kind of risk could have killed me, but it didn't. Within 6 months, TechLight landed a contract with a national real estate developer. Revenue tripled. They launched new lines, expanded to Chicago and Phoenix, and just this year opened a secondary HQ in Denver. My shares are worth 8 times what I put in. Jessica let out a low whistle. So you're, what, rich now? I smiled without humor. Comfortable. And your dad has no clue, no one does. That's the point. She leaned back, her eyes scanning the darkening sky. Why? Because if he knew, it would become his victory, his legacy. He'd say he raised me right, taught me discipline, gave me the mindset to win, but none of that's true. Everything I am, I became in spite of him. Jessica stayed quiet for a while, then said softly, "You know he's going to hate you more when he finds out." "I know." "Good." We both laughed quietly, not the light-hearted kind, the kind that tasted a little like closure. A few guests passed nearby on their way back to the tent, 1 or 2 glancing at us but not stopping. I didn't care. Let them wonder. Let them write their own stories about the woman in the dark dress sitting in the trees. Jessica stood and brushed off her skirt. "You ready to go back in?" "Not yet." She nodded, then squeezed my shoulder. "I'll grab us drinks. Don't disappear." I watched her walk away, her heels silent on the grass. Then I turned back toward the trees, the memory of Lucas's tired but hopeful eyes still vivid in my mind. Sometimes the best decisions you make are the ones you tell no one about. It was the summer of 2020 when Dad first told me about Daniel's latest venture. We were at a family brunch in San Antonio, a rare occasion where all 3 of us were in the same city. I had come mostly out of guilt and to avoid another email from my mother asking why I was being distant. Robert had barely touched his eggs before launching into the pitch like he was the one asking for seed money. Daniel's building an AI-powered productivity app. Mind Map AI. It's going to change how people manage their goals, their daily tasks, their whole mindset. I nodded politely, took a sip of my coffee, and asked what the revenue model was. Robert blinked like I had just spoken another language. "It's pre-revenue now," he said. "But that's normal for innovation. They've got a wait list already. People are talking about it." I turned to Daniel. He was scrolling through something on his phone, half smiling. "It's not about money yet. We're building community first. Once we hit 30,000 users, monetization kicks in." "How exactly?" He shrugged. "Premium features, probably. Coaching modules. Maybe an affiliate marketplace." I didn't say anything else. Not then. I had learned not to poke holes in his confidence, not in front of Robert. They fed off each other too well. Later, when we were alone in the kitchen, I asked again quietly, "What makes your app different from the 10,000 others trying to gamify productivity?" Daniel's smile faltered just for a second. Then he said, "You don't get it, Rachel. Not everything needs to be a risk analysis. Some of us are trying to build something real." I nodded. Fair enough. But I did get it. I got it more than he ever would. I had seen startups rise and fall faster than people could pronounce seed round. I had seen burn rates that would make bankers sweat and pitch decks made of dreams and nothing else. Mind Map AI launched in early 2021. There was a website, a teaser trailer, a slick brand package. Robert bragged about it to anyone who would listen. He called it next-gen leadership. Vision in action. By late 2022, the company was gone. User retention had cratered after the first month. The AI was underdeveloped, the app buggy, and customer service was non-existent. They had burned through Dad's initial $150,000 in 8 months, followed by another $50,000 pulled from his retirement fund. When I heard about the shutdown, I sent Daniel a simple text. "I'm sorry. Let me know if you want to talk." He never replied. A week later, Robert called me. Not to apologize, not to acknowledge anything, just to inform me with clipped words that Daniel had decided to take some time to reflect. "He'll bounce back," he said. "He's got grit. I had grit too, but mine had never been worthy of phone calls. That fall, while they were licking their wounds and pointing fingers at the market, I doubled down on my own research. AI wasn't going away, it just needed the right application. The next wave wasn't in productivity hacks, it was in medicine. In early 2023, I invested in MedIntel Labs, a company based out of Salt Lake City focused on using machine learning to detect early signs of neurological diseases through voice pattern analysis. Their pilot with a major health network had just cleared Phase 2 clinical trials. Their founder, Dr. Elena Cruz, had spent a decade building a neural net that could differentiate between anxiety, early dementia, and PTSD using less than 90 seconds of speech. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't sexy, but it worked. I met with her twice before writing a check, $500,000. I joined their advisory circle under a pseudonym, quietly contributing market insights and helping build out investor pipelines. No one in my family knew. Jessica didn't even know until months later. Sometimes at night I'd scroll through MedIntel's beta dashboard and listen to anonymous voice samples flagged by the AI. The tech was astonishing. But it was the impact that struck me. One day this could change lives. Catch symptoms early, give people time. Maybe even save someone like my old friend from base who never got diagnosed until it was too late. While Daniel rebuilt his confidence with motivational podcasts and brunches with Dad's country club friends, I kept working. No press, no photos, just results. People like my father believed legacy came from visibility, from speeches and spotlights. But I had come to understand legacy as something quieter, like water carving stone unnoticed until the shape had changed completely. I stood from the stone wall and dusted off my dress. The reception lights were brighter now, the sky gone navy, voices called for the cake cutting. I wasn't hungry. I walked slowly back toward the tent, letting the noise rise around me like a tide I could choose to step into or not. On the edge of the dance floor, Daniel stood with a drink in one hand and Sabrina on his arm. He looked relaxed, relieved, even as if the weight of the day had been lifted. Our eyes met for a second. He gave me a small smile. I returned it just enough. There was no anger left, only clarity. I slipped through the side of the reception tent, staying close to the bar where the lighting was dimmer and the chatter was less intense. A few guests were gathered near the wine table debating Cabernet over Merlot like it was a matter of national importance. I smiled faintly, taking in the sea of suits and sequins, the way people gravitated toward whoever had the best story to tell that hour. A tall man with salt and pepper hair caught my eye. He had the bearing of someone who had once worn a uniform. Sharp eyes, steady posture. He looked familiar, though I couldn't place him immediately. "You're Rachel Morgan, right?" I nodded, cautious. "I thought so. I'm Brian Cantrell." We overlapped briefly at Fort Carson. I was with the logistics unit before Syria. You were with peacekeeping, right? My lips parted slightly in surprise. It had been years since anyone mentioned that part of my life, let alone remembered it correctly. Yes. I was stationed near Manbij from 2014 to early 2016. He nodded, his expression shifting to something warmer. "I remember hearing about your unit. You guys held the line when the communication grid failed during that winter raid." That was one hell of a move. I let out a short breath. We just did our job. Most people wouldn't have stayed. We didn't have a choice. He smiled gently. Still, it takes guts. I was about to thank him when Robert appeared beside me like a storm cloud. He clapped a hand on Brian's shoulder with too much familiarity and too little grace. My daughter likes to make that sound more dramatic than it was, he said with a laugh. She was over there for a few years, then came home and quit. Now she's trying to find herself, I suppose. The words landed like slaps, not because they were loud, but because they were so comfortably cruel. Brian's eyes shifted toward me, uncertain. My father kept smiling, oblivious. She was always like that, you know. Starts strong, then gets bored, never finishes what she starts. I looked at Brian, held his gaze. Then I turned to Robert. At least I didn't set fire to your retirement fund over a hollow startup with a glitchy interface. The space around us shrank. Voices quieted. A couple standing nearby glanced over. A server paused mid-step. The string quartet kept playing, but the moment had shifted, tilted on its axis. Robert's smile faltered. For once, he didn't have a comeback. I turned back to Brian. It was good seeing you again. He gave me a small, respectful nod. Likewise. You did good over there. I walked away slowly, feeling the air thin behind me like someone had cracked a window in a room too long sealed shut. It wasn't triumph I felt, not satisfaction, just release. People stepped out of my way now. Some stared, others whispered behind wine glasses. I didn't care. Let them piece it together however they wanted. I passed Jessica on the way back to the patio. She raised an eyebrow and I could tell she had heard every word. She didn't say anything, just fell in step beside me as we moved toward the cooler edge of the lawn. You okay, fine. That was brutal. It needed to be said. We sat again by the stone wall, the air crisp now, the sun fully gone. The trees rustled with wind that finally felt clean. He's never going to see it, Jess said after a while. He's never going to give you what you deserve. I know, so why bother? Because sometimes the truth doesn't need an audience. It just needs to be spoken out loud once. She nodded slowly. Well, you got their attention now. Good. Let them wonder. Let them remember what I never asked them to. Jessica crossed her legs and reached into her bag like she had been waiting for the right moment. She didn't say anything right away, just unlocked her phone, scrolled for a few seconds, then turned the screen toward me. You should know, she said. The video was paused at the moment Robert had said it, the line that still hummed at the base of my skull. My daughter, nothing to brag about. Under the video was a message, a short one. You should know who you're partnering with. Sent it to Lucas Grant. This morning. My chest went still. I stared at the screen, then at her. You sent it to him. She nodded, calm. He deserves to know. I looked away. A breeze brushed my cheek. The music from the tent continued, a cheerful lie in the background. He's a professional, I said slowly. He won't back out of a deal over personal drama. I didn't tell him to. I just showed him what kind of man his new collaborator really is. What he chooses to do with it is up to him. My hands curled in my lap, fingers threading together tightly. I should have been furious, but I wasn't. Just unsteady. It was the first time in years someone had stood up for me without asking permission first. He doesn't know I'm involved, I whispered. As an investor, no. And I didn't tell him, but I think he'll figure it out. I stayed quiet for a long moment. Jessica had always been bold, loyal, loud. When I stayed silent, she didn't flinch around power or pretenders, and tonight it seemed she had decided I'd been silent long enough. He's here, Jessica nodded again. Got in late last night. Daniel said they're announcing some sort of joint project after the cake. Wedding tech or something equally niche and pointless. That tracked. Daniel loved combining buzzwords with weak execution. Lucas is too smart for that, I murmured. Smart doesn't mean invincible. I glanced across the lawn toward the reception tent glowing like a lantern in the dark, faces blurred together. But somewhere in there Lucas was walking among them. The man who once shook my hand in a freezing Seattle office, trusting a ghost investor to bet everything on his idea. I stood up slowly. I'm not ready for him to know. Jessica stood too, brushing her hands down the sides of her dress. Maybe it's time, Rach. You don't have to keep carrying this alone. It's not about that. It's about control. I chose to invest quietly. I wanted to build without spectacle. No one owns that story but me, and I didn't take that from you. I only gave him the truth about someone else. I met her eyes. The fire behind them was steady, not demanding. She wasn't pushing me to speak. She was giving me space to stand taller if I chose to. He hasn't said anything yet, no, but I saw his face when he watched the video. He didn't look confused. He looked disappointed, like something clicked. That told me everything I needed to know. We walked slowly toward the back of the tent. The chatter had shifted. People were beginning to take their seats for the toast and announcements. The staff was clearing empty glasses. A large projector had been set up near the front, paired with a mic stand. I stayed near the back, cloaked in shadows and distance. I didn't want a spotlight. I wanted a vantage point. If Lucas said anything, if he acted, it would happen here. And I would be ready. Not to interrupt, not to claim credit, just to watch the ripple begin. The tent quieted as the MC called everyone's attention. Silverware was set down, chairs scraped softly, and heads turned toward the stage where Daniel stood beside Sabrina, all smiles and polished charm. He thanked the guests, cracked a harmless joke about married life ahead, then motioned toward the side of the stage. And now, he said, I'm honored to introduce someone I greatly admire, someone who believed in my vision and helped make this next step possible. Please welcome Lucas Grant. The applause was polite, scattered. Most people didn't recognize the name. But I saw Jessica's eyes flick toward me as Lucas stepped into the light. He looked every inch the tech CEO. Crisp navy suit, no tie, confident but unassuming. He thanked Daniel for the kind words, greeted a few guests by name, then placed both hands on the podium and looked out at the crowd with an expression I hadn't seen on him before, thoughtful, weighted. Tonight, he began, is about love, about beginnings. And while I'm honored to be here as part of this special occasion, I also asked for a few moments to say something personal. The audience quieted further. A few guests leaned in. 3 years ago, my company was dying. Tech-light innovations had burned through every emergency reserve. Investors were walking. My engineers were working without pay, and I was preparing to shut our doors. He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. Then one morning, out of nowhere, I got a call. An anonymous offer, $1 million. No fanfare, no strings, just one condition: discretion. He let that sit. That single investment saved my company. We rebuilt. We grew. We survived. More than 200 employees kept their jobs. My family kept our home. That money didn't just save a business, it saved people. Murmurs stirred. Heads turned. For years, I honored that request for privacy. I didn't ask why. I just said thank you. But tonight I was reminded that silence sometimes protects the wrong people, and that gratitude should never be hidden. He looked down for a beat, then lifted his gaze. So tonight I want to break that silence. I want to say thank you to the woman who saved my company, to the one who never asked for credit, to the one who has more integrity than most people I've met in this industry. He turned slightly and looked past the crowd, eyes landing right on me. Rachel Morgan, thank you for everything. The silence that followed was not empty. It was sharp, electric. Faces turned toward me like a wave, some shocked, some confused. Jessica didn't look surprised at all. She just smiled. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't stand. I just looked back at Lucas and gave him the smallest of nods. Across the tent, Robert was frozen. His hand halfway to a champagne glass hung in the air like someone had hit pause on his world. His face was a war between disbelief and something he couldn't quite suppress, fear. Lucas stepped down from the stage, applause rising behind him. Some slow, some stunned. A few guests looked at me like they were seeing a new species entirely. I stayed seated. This wasn't a coronation. It wasn't revenge. It was truth said clearly into a mic under lights my father didn't control. Jessica leaned in. So, how's that ripple? I exhaled, slow and steady, just beginning. A hush lingered even after Lucas left the stage. People weren't clapping anymore. They were processing. Murmurs traveled like a soft current. I could hear my name carried in fragments. Some voices surprised, others hushed with curiosity. I didn't flinch. I didn't shift in my seat. There was power in stillness. Jessica squeezed my hand once, then let go. When I finally looked up, my eyes landed on my mother. Eleanor was standing near the second row, one hand covering her mouth. Her eyes glistened under the amber tent lights. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Her lips parted as if to speak, but she didn't. Instead, a tear slipped down her cheek and she turned away. Daniel stood beside her, awkward head low. He kept adjusting his cuffs like he didn't know what else to do with his hands. His new wife whispered something in his ear, but he didn't respond. He looked like a man who had just discovered the house he lived in was built on sand. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt like gravity had shifted, like the room had realigned to an axis it had long ignored. Lucas returned to the mic briefly. I thought he was done, but he cleared his throat and silence fell again. Before I forget, he said, "There's something else you should know. Rachel isn't just a brilliant investor. Years before I met her, she served 2 tours overseas, in Syria, peacekeeping. On one occasion, she pulled 2 injured soldiers from a collapsed checkpoint under enemy fire. She doesn't talk about it, but I thought you should know the kind of person you've been sitting next to all night." Gasps weren't audible, but the air shifted. I could feel it. This time I did lift my chin slightly. I didn't need validation, but facts had a way of cutting through silence sharper than pride ever could. Lucas left the stage again. No applause followed. No one knew what to do with the weight he had just dropped at their feet. I saw a woman at the next table lean over to her husband and whisper something while glancing at me. He nodded, slow and deliberate. I recognized another guest from Robert's office staring at me like he was trying to reconcile 2 versions of someone he never truly saw. Even the servers moved differently around me now. One of them, a young man with a tray of champagne, paused as he passed and whispered, "Thank you for your service," before continuing on. I said nothing, just nodded. Jessica leaned over, lips barely moving. "That was karma," she said. "No thunder, no fire, just precision." I didn't smile. I didn't speak, but my shoulders eased. The weight I had carried for years wasn't gone, but it was acknowledged, and that was enough. Some truths didn't need to be shouted. They only needed room to breathe. The guests had started to trickle out their goodbyes, stretched into long embraces and tipsy laughter under dimming lanterns. I stayed back, giving space for the ones who still needed the illusion of closeness. Jessica knew my rhythm. She lingered near the valet, casually texting, giving me room to breathe before we left. I stepped toward the edge of the lawn where the last of the roses glowed faintly in the garden lights. That's when I heard the footsteps behind me. Slower this time, heavy with something he wasn't ready to name. Rachel. I turned slightly. Robert stood a few feet away, shoulders squared like he was preparing for a press conference, not a conversation with his daughter. Why didn't you tell me? His voice wasn't angry, just confused, like the idea that I could have accomplished something without his guidance had cracked something in him. I faced him fully. You never wanted to hear it. His mouth opened, then shut again. His hands twitched at his sides. That's not true. It is. Every time I tried to share something, you redirected the conversation to Daniel or dismissed it like it was a phase. I stopped trying. It wasn't worth the silence. He looked past me like searching the lawn might offer a better defense. I thought you were just figuring things out, that you needed time. I gave a bitter smile. I wasn't lost, Dad. You just never looked close enough to see me. He stepped forward, softer now. You were always quiet. You never demanded anything. That's not the same as not needing to be seen. We stood there, words drying in the air between us. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. I didn't say it with anger, just truth. Behind him, Eleanor approached slowly. She looked older tonight, the kind of tired that no makeup could soften. Rachel, can we talk? I turned to her. For a moment, her eyes pleaded. I remembered her braiding my hair before school dances, telling me to stay strong when Dad's coldness cut deeper than any teenage heartbreak. We want to move forward, she said. I know we haven't been fair. I studied her face. There was sincerity there. But sincerity without action was just another lullaby. I won't live in rejection anymore. She blinked. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. I stepped back. I'm building something now. A mentorship circle for women veterans starting their own businesses. Real support. Not charity, not headlines, just hands helping each other climb. Robert frowned. You're what I turned. Exactly what I said. And I won't slow down to explain it to people who only listen when a man gives the speech. Jessica was already waiting by the car. I joined her without another word. As we drove away, the resort lights dimmed behind us, swallowed by the Texas night. I didn't look back. The envelope arrived exactly 7 days later. Cream cardstock, my name handwritten in cursive I hadn't seen in years. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. I let it sit on the kitchen counter for hours unopened. I brewed coffee, checked emails, walked my dog, answered investor calls. Still the envelope waited, silent, heavy. That night I opened it. Rachel, I failed you in more ways than I can count, not by action but by silence. I let things be said in our house that I should have challenged. I let your father's pride bury your voice, and I stood beside him when I should have stood beside you. I see that now. Watching you sit with such grace even when the spotlight finally turned your way broke something open in me. You didn't gloat, you didn't retaliate, you just stayed steady. I don't know if I have the right to ask for anything now, but I want to say I'm sorry. I hope one day we can sit together again. No speeches, just the truth. Mom. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I simply tucked it into the drawer beside my bed. A record of something once broken that might not need fixing, but at least deserved acknowledgement. Later that week, Lucas and I met for coffee in Dallas. He looked better out of the suit, less curated. We sat by the window of a quiet cafe, laptops, open legal pads between us. Valor Ventures, he said, tapping the notebook. I like it. Me too. I want it to mean something, not just capital. Guidance, community, a chance for women who came back from war and weren't sure what came next. He nodded. You've got the network. I'll help shape the portfolio. We build it clean, no shortcuts, and no headlines with my family name. Of course, you earned this in your own right. No need to tie it to anything else. We spent hours outlining strategy grant models, vetting processes, the kind of work that felt more like planting than pitching. Seeds meant to outlive us. When we wrapped, Lucas leaned back. I spoke with a few folks at the VA. They're excited. They've never seen anything like this. You're about to change more lives than you realize. I shrugged, but something warm settled in my chest. That was the point. Jessica came by later that evening. She tossed her keys on my counter and opened her laptop. Okay, media plan. I raised an eyebrow. Already, we don't wait. We shape the story while it's still yours to tell. I smiled. No names, no weddings, obviously. This is about Valor Ventures, the mission, the women. Not your father's tantrums. She clicked open a pitch draft. You're a former peacekeeper, combat vet, private investor turned founder of a new kind of fund. That's the story. No shadows, no apologies. I skimmed the page. It was sharp, respectful, accurate. I trust you. Jessica looked at me serious. You don't owe anyone more than what you've already given. But the world could use more stories like yours. Not for the drama, for the path forward. I nodded slowly. Then let's give them a map. The flight back to Denver was quiet. No one knew me on board. I liked it that way. Clouds drifted past the window as I traced the outline of the business plan folded inside my backpack. It wasn't finished, but it was real now. Tangible. When I unlocked my apartment door, the scent of cedar and coffee grounds welcomed me home. The space was still small, the walls still bare except for one. That wall held everything I was building. Hand-drawn mind maps, budget sheets, notes in red ink from Lucas. It looked like chaos to anyone else, but to me it was purpose made visible. I slipped off my coat and pulled the envelope from my bag. Eleanor's letter, still creased, still soft at the corners. I unfolded it one more time, rereading her words without the sting they first carried. It didn't fix everything, but it no longer needed to. Next to the plans for Valor Ventures, I pinned the letter to the wall. Below it, I added a sticky note, 4 words in my handwriting. I'm still standing. Thanks. I stood back and looked at it all. The past, the future, the strange quiet of peace when you stop begging for recognition and start walking your own direction. I didn't need applause. I didn't need headlines. And I sure as hell didn't need validation from a family that had only ever seen me as a silhouette behind someone else's spotlight. My worth had never been up for debate. It had simply waited for the right moment to speak for itself. Out the window, the Denver skyline blinked under a wash of early evening light. I closed the blinds and poured a glass of water. No champagne, no victory toast, just a breath. And then I sat down to work again. Because the truth is, you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to prove yourself to people who never ask the right questions. You just have to keep showing up, keep building, keep choosing the quiet, steady kind of strength that doesn't fade when the music stops. Your story might be unfolding in silence, but that doesn't make it any less powerful. Sometimes the loudest answer is the one you don't say out loud. Your story might be rewriting fate behind the scenes. Don't let anyone define you, not even your family.